Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The Harry Potter universe is not just a series of books and films, it's a living, breathing world filled with mysteries and ambiguities that continue to spark imagination and debate. And naturally, out of this magical fog emerge theories. Some surprisingly logical, others delightfully absurd. Some of these have been acknowledged by J.K. Rowling herself, while others were firmly denied. Today, we're diving into the theories that the author has officially debunked. Make yourself comfortable. It's going to be fascinating. Number 1, Ron Weasley is actually Dumbledore traveling through time. Back in 2004, a wild fan theory took the internet by storm. Ron Weasley was actually Albus Dumbledore, who had traveled back from the future. The evidence? Similar physical descriptions, tall, thin, long-nosed, a shared fondness for sweets, and Dumbledore's uncanny knowledge of Harry, Hermione and Ron's lives, as if he had always been there. Rowling's response was short and decisive. False theory. Number 2, Draco is a werewolf, Snape is a vampire. This idea grew from Draco's change in behavior in the 6th book and his frequent presence around Fenrir Greyback. Some speculated that Snape was secretly helping him deal with the aftermath of werewolf transformations. Others took it further, suggesting that Snape himself was a vampire. After all, he assigned essays on werewolves, and traditionally, vampires and werewolves are sworn enemies. But Rowling crushed both theories. Neither Snape nor Draco has anything to do with mythical creatures. Number 3, everything is happening inside Harry's head. One of the darkest theories suggests that the entire magical world is just a product of Harry's imagination, a way for a neglected boy under the stairs to escape his grim reality. Steve Kloves, screenwriter of the first film, admitted that such interpretations were discussed. An early version of the script even had Harry talking to a spider, a scene later removed to avoid casting doubt on his sanity. Rowling knew of the theory too, tweeted and dismissed it. Everything Harry experienced was real, at least within the magical world. Number 4, Rita Skeeter is actually J.K. Rowling. According to this playful fan theory, Rita Skeeter was banished from the wizarding world and decided to reveal its secrets to Muggles under the pen name of J.K. Rowling. Of course, the theory is pure fantasy. Rowling was born in 1965 and has written many works beyond Harry Potter. Still, for those who believe in a bit of magic, it's a fun idea to entertain, isn't it? Number 5, Fawkes is Dumbledore's Horcrux. The theory that Fawkes, Dumbledore's loyal phoenix, is actually a Horcrux containing a piece of Dumbledore's soul sparked something close to irritation in Rowling. Fans seem to forget that creating a Horcrux requires murder, a deeply dark and evil act. And while Dumbledore was certainly complex, he would never sacrifice his phoenix to chase immortality. Rowling's reaction was crystal clear. The idea that anyone believes this upsets me. Number 6, Harry and Hermione are siblings. An odd and unsettling theory claims that Harry and Hermione are secretly brother and sister, explaining their lack of romantic involvement. Supporters point to Hermione's strange early familiarity with Harry and her deep comfort around him. However, Rowling herself admitted in 2014 that Hermione probably should have married Harry instead of Ron, a statement that thoroughly debunks the sibling theory. After all, brothers and sisters don't get married. Number 7, Dumbledore and McGonagall were secretly in love. In the early 2000s, some fans believed that a hidden romance simmered between the headmaster of Hogwarts and Professor McGonagall, masked behind their professional camaraderie. That theory persisted until 2007, when Rowling revealed that Dumbledore had been in love with Gellert Grindelwald. And just like that, canon triumphed over fan fiction. Number 8. Hermione's parents never remembered her. After Hermione cast a memory charm on her parents To protect them during the war, the books never revisit what became of them. Fans filled the gap with tragedy. Hermione saved the world, but lost her family. Rowling, however, reassured readers that after Voldemort's fall, Hermione reversed the spell and restored her parents' memories. Her family was reunited. Number 9, Crookshanks was James Potter's cat. Crookshanks was no ordinary cat. He watched, he listened, and when he moved, it meant something. From the start, he hated Scabbers. He chased him, growled at him, tried to expose him. Fans took notice, and a theory formed. Crookshanks once belonged to James Potter. It made sense. He was old. The shopkeeper at Magical Menagerie said he'd been there for years, unwanted, waiting. What if he wasn't just any stray? What if he had lived at Godric's Hollow, seen Peter Pettigrew betray the Potters? Maybe he recognized the rat. Maybe he remembered. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Crookshanks does more than pounce. He helps Sirius Black, not by accident, on purpose. He steals passwords, leads Sirius to Ron and Scabbers, guards the shrieking shack door. That's not just instinct, that's strategy, like a soldier following orders from a war long past. But Rowling ended the fun. Crookshanks is half Kneasel, she said. That's why he's clever. He never belonged to the Potters. He didn't remember James. He just sensed lies. Kneasels are like that. They smell trouble. Crookshanks didn't know the history. He just knew something was wrong. Number 10. Hagrid used to be a Death Eater. Hagrid was too kind, too soft, too trusting. That's what made some fans suspicious. He was expelled. He had secrets. He was close to creatures no one else would touch. What if he wasn't always on the good side? The theory was bold. Hagrid, a former Death Eater, someone who followed Tom Riddle in his youth. Maybe he got scared. Maybe he switched sides. Dumbledore forgave him, gave him a second chance, and Hagrid spent the rest of his life trying to make it right. Protecting Harry, guarding secrets, paying for old sins. They pointed to Chamber of Secrets, to that old story. Tom Riddle blaming Hagrid. Aragog never hurt no one, Hagrid said. But what if Riddle wasn't lying? What if there was something else between them, something darker? Why would Tom accuse him unless he knew him better than anyone guessed? But J.K. Rowling shut it down. That's utter rubbish, she said. Hagrid has one of the kindest hearts in the whole series. And she meant it. He cried for Buckbeak, raised a baby dragon in secret, went into the Forbidden Forest in the middle of a war just to calm the giants. Number 11, Voldemort is a descendant of Godric Gryffindor. Tom Riddle was too powerful, too smart, too dangerous. He spoke Parseltongue as a child, made a Horcrux at 16, controlled minds with a smile. It didn't feel human, it felt legendary. That's why some fans began to wonder, what if he carried more than just Slytherin's blood? The theory was bold. Maybe he wasn't just the heir of Slytherin. Maybe he was also a descendant of Godric Gryffindor. The idea caught fire. It explained everything. His brilliance, his strength, his terrifying charm. Fans said no one could be that powerful without having both lions and serpents in his blood. They looked to Merope Gaunt, poor, quiet, broken, but from a family of ancient blood. The Gaunts were proud, even if they had little left. Maybe a Gryffindor line had mixed in generations ago, hidden in madness, buried under shame, until it all woke up in Tom. But J.K. Rowling crushed the theory fast. Voldemort is entirely the product of the Gaunts, she said. There's no Gryffindor in him. He didn't inherit greatness. He built it using fear, pain, and control. No legacy, no destiny, just rage. In Chamber of Secrets, Tom said, Voldemort is my past, present, and future. Not love, not courage, not even a house, just a name, a weapon. He didn't need Gryffindor's blood. He hated everything Gryffindor stood for. But still, the theory lingers because it's tempting to believe power must come from somewhere noble. that monsters are made, not born. But Voldemort, he's the proof. Sometimes evil doesn't need a crown, just a choice. And a boy who never learned love. Number 12. Neville is the real chosen one. The prophecy didn't name Harry, not exactly. It spoke of a boy born at the end of July, a child whose parents had defied Voldemort 3 times. There were 2 boys who fit that description. One was Harry Potter, the other was Neville Longbottom. Neville's life was marked by silence and shadows. His parents, Frank and Alice, were heroes, tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange. He was raised by his strict grandmother, always feeling like a disappointment. He couldn't even control his own toad. But slowly something changed. Neville grew, not in power, but in courage. In the Deathly Hallows, he stands alone against Voldemort. "I'll join you when hell freezes over," he yells, then pulls the sword of Gryffindor from the sorting hat and kills Nagini. Many fans believed that was proof that Neville was the true chosen one. Maybe Voldemort chose wrong. Maybe fate had something else in mind. After all, Neville didn't just survive, he thrived. Without the fame, without the scar, without the prophecy written on his name. Rowling answered this theory with care. She said it could have been Neville. But the prophecy only took shape after Voldemort made his choice. By trying to kill Harry, he marked him. The line was drawn in that moment. He will have power the Dark Lord knows not. That power was love, and it lived in Harry because Voldemort made it so. But Neville still mattered. In Order of the Phoenix, he trains with Harry in the DA, stumbles through spells but never gives up. By the end, he's standing over the broken remains of Voldemort's last Horcrux, not as the chosen one, but as a hero. A boy who never needed a prophecy to prove his worth. Maybe the prophecy didn't pick Neville. Maybe the Dark Lord didn't fear him. But when the moment came, Neville didn't hesitate. And in the end, that's what made him powerful. Not destiny, choice. Number 13, Arthur Weasley is a secret agent. Arthur Weasley never looked dangerous. He smiled too easily, talked to rubber ducks, wore old robes and loved muggle plugs. But that's exactly why some fans got suspicious. What if it was all an act? What if Arthur wasn't just a kind father? What if he was a spy? He worked deep inside the Ministry, the Department of Misuse of Muggle Artifacts. It sounded harmless, but that office sat right near everything. Files, corridors, secrets. What better place to gather intel? And Arthur was always there, watching, listening, fixing things that weren't broken. Then came the snake, Order of the Phoenix. Arthur is attacked by Nagini. She strikes. He should die, but he doesn't. He survives. Some called it luck, others didn't. How does a soft-spoken father survive a strike from Voldemort's own creature? Fans said he knew more than he let on, and those 7 children, each placed like pieces on a board, Bill in Gringotts, Charlie in Romania, Percy inside the Ministry, Fred and George, masters of distraction, Ron at Harry's side, Ginny close to prophecy. Coincidence? Or the perfect cover? Rowling ended the theory with a laugh. Arthur is absolutely honest, kind, and loyal, she said. If he were a spy, Molly would need an obliviator every night. That was that. Arthur wasn't a double agent. He was just a man who loved his family and battery-powered radios. But still, that twinkle in his eye, that quiet way he listened. Maybe he wasn't a spy, but he was never a fool. And that's what makes fans look twice. Because in the world of magic, even the warmest smile might hide something deeper. Number 14, Voldemort is Dumbledore's brother. There was always something strange in the way Dumbledore spoke about Tom Riddle. Not just fear, not just regret. Something deeper. In The Half-Blood Prince, he tells Harry, "It was my mistake. I was blinded by the brilliance I saw in the boy." It didn't sound like a teacher talking. It sounded personal, like family. That's how the theory was born. What if Voldemort wasn't just Dumbledore's enemy? What if he was his brother? Dumbledore already had a brother, Aberforth, a sister too, Ariana. Her story ended in tragedy, one child lost. Could there have been another? A child born in secret, raised far away, one no one ever spoke of. Tom Riddle's obsession with his bloodline added fuel to the fire. He hunted down the Gaunts, murdered his father, hated his Muggle side. In Chamber of Secrets he snarled, "I fashioned myself a new name, a name I knew wizards everywhere would one day fear to speak." That kind of rage doesn't just come from nowhere. Maybe it came from being denied, forgotten, hidden. And Dumbledore, he never turned his back on Tom. He watched him for years, protected the school from him, warned others but never gave up entirely. He carried the weight, as if he owed him something, as if the war wasn't just good versus evil, but a shattered bond between brothers. Rowling shut it down fast. "No," she said, "Tom Riddle has no connection to Dumbledore's family. His lineage is entirely his own, the Gaunts and a Muggle father." The theory, like many, died with that quote. But the feeling stayed. Maybe they weren't brothers by blood, but they were mirror images, two boys with power. One found love, the other never did. And in the end, Dumbledore didn't just fight Voldemort, he mourned him. Number 15, Hermione is a reincarnated founder of Hogwarts. Hermione Granger walked into the Great Hall for the first time with wide eyes and a book clutched to her chest. She already knew the names of every spell in the first-year curriculum. She had memorized Hogwarts, a history, before even setting foot in the castle. To many fans, this was the first sign. Hermione wasn't just a bright witch. She was someone else entirely. Perhaps Rowena Ravenclaw reborn? The theory quickly spread through fan circles. Hermione's sharp mind, unmatched dedication to knowledge, and her calm, logical way of thinking reminded people of Rowena herself, the founder of Ravenclaw House. Both were known for their brilliance. Rowena built a legacy around wit and wisdom. Hermione, though sorted into Gryffindor, displayed the same traits time and time again. Her name, too, Hermione, was rare, ancient, and strikingly magical. It sounded like the kind of name an old soul would carry through the centuries. There were moments in the books that gave this theory fire. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hermione solves Snape's logic puzzle in the underground chamber, something even Ron and Harry couldn't begin to grasp. Books and cleverness, there are more important things. Friendship and bravery, she says. But who else but a centuries-old mind could understand the deeper value of intellect and its limits? Fans also pointed to her unusual magical intuition. Hermione often grasped advanced spells long before others. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, she uses a time turner to take extra classes, a rare, dangerous magical object trusted only to those with exceptional responsibility. And she never misused it. Not even once. Could a young girl truly handle that level of power? Or was it someone who had lived lifetimes? Still, J.K. Rowling put this idea to rest. Hermione is a very bright girl from a Muggle family, she said in an interview. She's not a reincarnation, she's not chosen, she's not descended from anyone. Number 16, Snape is Harry's real father. Of all the wild and whimsical theories that have emerged from the pages of Harry Potter, none have stirred more hushed whispers or raised more skeptical eyebrows than the notion that Severus Snape, not James Potter, was Harry's true father. A theory born in shadowed corners of the internet, it lingered there for years, sometimes laughed off as nonsense, other times embraced with an unsettling conviction. And yet, once you begin to unravel it thread by thread, you find a narrative both painful and plausible if you allow your imagination to wander just beyond the canon. The theory hinges on emotion, not evidence. But what a deep well of emotion it draws from. Snape's love for Lily Evans was not a passing schoolboy crush, nor was it an ordinary, unrequited affection. It was obsessive, sacrificial, enduring. "Always," he whispered to Dumbledore years after her death, still holding on to the same silvery doe that had once danced beside Lily's own Patronus. This wasn't just love, it was loyalty that defied time and death. What if, the theory asks, Snape's devotion went even further? What if he and Lily shared a secret the world never discovered? Fans point first to Harry's green eyes, the same as his mother's. But here's the twist. James had hazel eyes. Snape, as described in The Half-Blood Prince, had dark eyes, cold and black like tunnels. Yet Harry's eyes, unmistakably, are Lily's, a trait that Snape obsessively noted time and again. "You have your mother's eyes," he tells Harry in their final moments, collapsing in a pool of blood and regret. Could this obsession with Lily's eyes reflect more than just remembrance? Could it be a code, a key to a truth hidden beneath years of grief? James Potter, bold and brash, was the golden boy of Gryffindor, Quidditch champion, adored by his friends, admired by Dumbledore, but his arrogance was no secret. Even Sirius Black once admitted he was an arrogant little Burke, strutting about the place. In contrast, Harry, though brave and loyal, often carried a quiet hesitance, a deep-seated humility. He wasn't born to bask in attention, rather he often shied from it. "I'm not trying to be a hero," he says more than once. Could this disparity in character be a clue that James might not have passed on his personality after all? Consider also the way Snape treated Harry. It was never merely cold or indifferent, it was laced with something deeper, sharper, and sometimes paradoxically protective. He insulted him, belittled him, but when danger loomed, he was always there, behind the scenes, shielding the boy from harm. In the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry's broom goes berserk during a Quidditch match, it's Snape who mutters a counter-curse, not Quirrell. When Dumbledore reveals this, Harry is stunned. Snape was trying to save me? It is an odd type of guardianship, a man who loathes yet protects, a man at war with his own emotions. And then there's Dumbledore, a wizard who knows all, sees all, manipulates when he must, but also protects secrets with the gravest of intentions. He knew of Snape's love for Lily. He knew the strength of it and the tragedy it left behind. Could he have kept a larger truth hidden, not just out of compassion for Snape, but to protect Harry from a revelation that would change everything he believed about his origins? Snape, we learn, became a double agent not merely for loyalty to the Order, but out of love for Lily. He begged Voldemort to spare her life. Even after she chose another man, even after she died, he remained in service of her memory. "In return," Dumbledore says in The Prince's Tale, "you shall protect her son." Her son, not their son. A linguistic clue, perhaps, or simply Rowling's refusal to indulge fantasy. But still the phrasing leaves enough room for ambiguity to make theorists itch. If Snape had fathered Harry, what would that have changed? Some say everything. It would reframe the entire saga as a tale of hidden lineage, of secrets buried beneath layers of magic and war. Others say it would betray the message Rowling intended, that heroism comes not from bloodlines but choices, that Harry, though raised in pain, had the strength of his mother's compassion and his father's courage. But still, fans cling to details that hint at something unsaid. Snape's harsh treatment of Harry might then be reinterpreted not as disdain for James, but as inner torment of seeing a child he couldn't acknowledge. Imagine the emotional turmoil: to protect, but never love openly, to guide, but only from the shadows. "He has her eyes," Snape tells Dumbledore with a tone that breaks beneath its surface. Some fans have gone further, suggesting that Snape and Lily shared a brief romance before her marriage to James, that perhaps, at a moment of weakness or defiance, they connected. A theory without proof, yes, but one that haunts fan fiction forums and speculative essays with enduring force. Let's look at the timeline. Harry was born on July 31st, 1980. Lily and James married sometime in 1979. But Rowling never specified exactly when they began dating seriously. Could there have been a moment, perhaps during their final year at Hogwarts or the immediate years after, when Lily doubted her path? Snape, despite his allegiance to the dark arts, may have still been in her heart. Fans argue that Lily's capacity to forgive was vast. Could she have seen something redeemable in him, something that led to a hidden relationship? Then there's the photograph that Harry finds in Order of the Phoenix, his parents, smiling and laughing, surrounded by friends. But Lily's expression, fans say, holds a sadness, a distance. In another life, another path, perhaps she might have chosen differently. Perhaps she still mourned a friendship that had soured too bitterly. And if that choice had left her with a secret, a child that bore not just her eyes, but the hidden legacy of the boy she once trusted, it would have been a truth too volatile to reveal. Number 17, Luna Lovegood is a seer. It was in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix that readers first met Luna Lovegood. She was sitting alone in a compartment of the Hogwarts Express, reading The Quibbler upside down, wearing a necklace of butterbeer corks and looking dreamily out the window. That moment instantly set her apart. Luna was not like the others. But behind her peculiar demeanour, ethereal voice, and belief in nargles and crumple-horned snorkax, many fans began to wonder. Was Luna Lovegood more than just odd? Could she, perhaps, be a seer in disguise? The theory that Luna possessed some form of clairvoyance grew stronger with time. Her manner of speech, slow, thoughtful, and sometimes oddly timed, often resembled the cryptic proclamations of another Hogwarts figure, Professor Sybil Trelawney. But, whereas Trelawney's predictions were grand and dramatic, often delivered in trances, Luna's statements were gentle, even whimsical, yet frequently hit uncannily close to the truth. She didn't predict the future in a traditional sense, but there was something about her, a knowing glance, a sudden insight that felt uncomfortably prophetic. Take, for instance, the moment in the Department of Mysteries when Luna calmly suggested to Harry and the others that there were other ways to get through the locked door. The group had been desperately trying to open it, and Luna's words, said in a soft tone, sounded more like suggestion than command. And yet, she was right. It was this intuitive grasp of situations, this quiet confidence, that made fans believe Luna was operating on a different wavelength, one perhaps touched by a deeper magical sense. Luna's ability to see thestrals added another layer to the mystery. Thestrals, those skeletal winged horses visible only to those who had seen death, were invisible to most students. Even Harry, for a time. Yet Luna had been seeing them long before him. "You're not mad," she told Harry when he first spotted the creatures pulling the carriages. "I can see them too." Her calm acceptance of the macabre and the invisible, combined with her open belief in things others dismissed as fiction, made her seem like a bridge between two worlds, the seen and the unseen. Her connection to the unseen extended beyond magical creatures. Luna often spoke about death with startling serenity, as if she knew something others didn't. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry visits the Lovegood home, he sees a painting on her ceiling. Harry, Hermione, Ron, Ginny, and Neville, all linked by a golden chain spelling the word friends. It was a deeply emotional scene, but also revealing. Luna hadn't just painted their faces, she had captured their essence. She saw people, not just their outer shells, but their inner truths, their pain, loyalty, potential. Then there was her conversation with Harry after Sirius's death. While most tried to comfort Harry with platitudes, Luna offered a different kind of empathy. "It's not like I'll never see Mum again, is it?" she said softly. "You heard them, just behind the veil, didn't you?" This statement, seemingly simple, was profound. Luna's belief in an afterlife wasn't based on theology. It came from something deeper, a sense, a vision, perhaps. She didn't try to convince Harry nor explain what couldn't be explained. She just knew. This knowing quality, the intuition, the ability to speak truth when others floundered, is what led fans to question whether Luna Lovegood might be related spiritually or even magically to Cassandra Trelawney, the famed seer and ancestor of Professor Trelawney. Cassandra was known for making true prophecies, though cursed, never to be believed. Luna, in her own way, echoed this pattern. She spoke of strange creatures and phenomena, and though others laughed, she was often right. When she mentioned Raxburt's clouding thoughts, it sounded like nonsense. But wasn't it also a metaphor for how prejudice and ignorance worked? J.K. Rowling addressed the question directly in an interview. A fan once asked, "Did Luna have the gift of prophecy, just not in the classical sense?" Rowling's answer was both illuminating and mysterious. "Luna is not a seer," she replied. "Her wisdom comes from thinking freely, not from seeing the future." This statement didn't shut the door. If anything, it opened another. Luna's power wasn't prophecy, it was perception. She saw now with an intensity that others reserved for omens and dreams. It's worth examining how Luna's interactions often challenged the assumptions of others. In Half-Blood Prince, when Hermione rudely dismisses Luna's Quibbler articles, Luna doesn't retaliate with anger. Instead, she shrugs and smiles. "I enjoyed the meetings," she says about the D. "It was like having friends." Her simplicity is disarming, but in that statement lies a deeper insight into loneliness, acceptance, and the quiet dignity of those who see the world differently. Luna didn't need to predict the future. She shaped the present by simply being herself. When she was captured by Death Eaters and imprisoned in the Malfoy Manor, it wasn't her wand or combat skills that protected her. It was her mind. Luna's calmness, her ability to remain composed in terrifying situations, spoke of an inner world untouched by fear. Ollivander, who shared a cell with her, later described her as an extraordinary girl indeed. He didn't elaborate, but readers were left with the impression that Luna's strength was not in spellcasting, but in spirit. In the final battle, Luna fights bravely, standing alongside the others, dueling and defending Hogwarts, but her most striking moment comes not in combat, but in words. When Harry, having returned from King's Cross, struggles to find a way through the crowd, it is Luna who steps forward. "Oi, there he is!" she shouts, creating a path for him. Then, with a knowing look, she turns to him and says, "I'll distract them." It was a moment of pure clarity. She understood what he needed before he even asked. Luna had always known when to speak and when to stay silent. Number 18. Nagini is Voldemort's mother. He called her Nagini with such softness that it unsettled even the most hardened Death Eaters. She was more than a snake, more than a pet. Voldemort let her slither across his lap, wrapped her around his neck during council meetings, and even spoke to her in Parseltongue with a tenderness he showed to no one else. The relationship between the Dark Lord and his serpent companion has always disturbed readers, but for some fans it evoked a deeper, darker suspicion. What if she wasn't just a magical beast? What if Nagini was actually Voldemort's mother, transformed, trapped, and tormented in her new form as part of a horrific, dark ritual? This fan theory didn't emerge in the early 2000s when the books were being released. Instead, it grew quietly in forums, in late-night Reddit threads, in essays whispered across Tumblr pages, gaining shape and momentum with every new angle. The seed of this idea lay in the strange intimacy between Voldemort and Nagini, something that went far beyond master and pet. She was the only creature he fed directly from his own kills. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, we see Voldemort milking Nagini for venom, using it as a crucial ingredient to sustain his own cursed half-life. That detail chilled many. Why would he rely on her so personally, so vulnerably? The theory found fertile ground after Fantastic Beasts. The Crimes of Grindelwald was released in 2018. In the film, Nagini is portrayed not as an ordinary snake, but as a cursed woman, a maledictus. Played by Claudia Kim, she's shown as gentle, empathetic, and tragically fated to transform into a snake permanently. The knowledge that Nagini was once a human added weight to what once seemed like idle speculation. Was there more to her story? Tom Riddle's mother, Merope Gaunt, died in childbirth. That is canon. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore tells Harry, "She died soon after giving birth, poor girl, without ever trying to save herself with magic." Merope's story is one of heartbreak and abandonment. She was a witch of pure blood, born into the decaying house of Gaunt, obsessed with Slytherin heritage and Parseltongue. Merope fell in love with a muggle, Tom Riddle Sr., and used a love potion to seduce him. Once she stopped giving him the potion, he abandoned her. Alone, destitute, and pregnant, she gave birth to her son in a muggle orphanage and died shortly after. But the fan theory twists the narrative. It asks, what if Merope didn't die? What if, in a final desperate attempt to escape her grief, she used ancient blood magic to sever her soul and transfer her being into another vessel, a snake? What if the body died, but the spirit lived on, imprisoned in scales and fangs? And what if Tom Marvolo Riddle, once grown, stumbled upon this cursed creature, unknowingly drawn to her as a fragment of himself? It would explain Voldemort's obsession with snakes, not just his ability to talk to them, which he inherited from Salazar Slytherin's bloodline, but his deep emotional connection to one specific snake. It would explain the softness in his voice when he speaks to her, the way he says, in Goblet of Fire, "Nagini tells me the old caretaker is coming." He listens to her, he trusts her, he even entrusts a piece of his soul to her, making her one of his 7 Horcruxes. This is a particularly jarring detail. Voldemort created Horcruxes out of objects tied to power, a ring of his ancestor, Hufflepuff's cup, Ravenclaw's diadem, the diary of his own teenage self. To make Nagini a Horcrux, a living, breathing creature, feels different. Fans wondered, why her? Why give a piece of your immortal soul to a beast unless that beast held a special, sacred place in your heart? In Deathly Hallows, it becomes clear that Nagini is always close to Voldemort. At Bathilda Bagshot's house, she even impersonates the elderly historian, hiding inside her corpse and waiting to strike. "The snake was inside her!" Harry yells, horrified. Hermione is shaken. The dark magic required to hide a living creature inside a corpse is obscene, grotesque. And yet Voldemort trusted Nagini to do it. The theory goes further. It suggests that the Maledictus curse, introduced in Fantastic Beasts, was not a separate tale, but a hidden origin story. That Merope Gaunt may have suffered from a dormant Maledictus bloodline. That perhaps her transformation wasn't spontaneous, but triggered by Voldemort himself through ritualistic magic to bind her and harness her essence. A dark echo of maternal sacrifice, a parody of the love Lily Potter gave to Harry. After all, Voldemort never understood love. He was conceived under the effects of a love potion, raised without affection, and obsessed with control. What better way to conquer his own past than by controlling his mother's soul, making her serve him, obey him, be useful to him at last? The theory suggests Voldemort didn't merely reject love. He destroyed it, subverted it, made it crawl at his feet in the form of a snake. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore says, "He shed his friends, his last ties to the world of other people. He had always been alone. But what if he wasn't entirely alone? What if Nagini was the closest thing to a companion he allowed himself, and the only being he treated with something resembling kindness?" Rowling, however, has shut this theory down. On Twitter and in interviews, she has stated clearly, "Nagini is not Voldemort's mother. She is not related to him. She is a separate character entirely." The canon insists that Merop died shortly after childbirth, and yet fans resist. Part of the reason this theory won't die is because it reflects a yearning in readers to explain Voldemort's humanity, or his lack thereof. If he loved his mother in some twisted way, if he even sought her in the form of Nagini, it adds a layer of tragic complexity to his evil. It makes him less of a cartoon villain and more of a broken soul, reaching for the only kind of love he could control. Number 19. The Wizarding World is Harry's coma after falling down the stairs. It starts, as so many tales do, with a boy in a cupboard. A boy named Harry Potter, 11 years old, with a lightning-shaped scar and a life made dim by the cruelty of his relatives. The Dursleys of number 4, Privet Drive, were proud of being perfectly normal, thank you very much, and they ensured Harry never forgot he was not. For years, fans accepted this beginning as the tragic but powerful origin of the world's most beloved wizard, but not everyone. In shadowed corners of the internet, in feverish late-night discussions, a theory grew, quiet at first, then bolder. What if Harry Potter never made it to Hogwarts? What if there were no Platform 934, no flying letters, no giant with a pink umbrella? What if instead everything, the magic, the adventures, the dragons, the destiny, was a construct of a damaged mind, a boy lying unconscious at the foot of a staircase? The theory, both horrifying and strangely plausible, claims that Harry never escaped the Dursleys' abuse, that the fateful day when Aunt Petunia shrieked at him to get the mail and Dudley shoved him out of the way, Harry fell. Hard. Down the stairs, a crack of bone, a flash of pain, and then blackness. The cupboard became a tomb, the staircase his final sight. But his mind, they say, didn't surrender. It escaped, conjuring a vibrant world full of meaning, love, and justice, a place where he mattered, a place where a lonely, abused boy became the chosen one, a coma dressed in robes and wandlight. And doesn't it make a strange kind of sense? The details of the wizarding world, looked at through this lens, suddenly seem skewed. The people in Harry's real life are exaggerated into caricatures in his dream. Vernon becomes a grotesque symbol of ignorance, Petunia a cold, screeching banshee. Dudley, once merely a spoiled cousin, transforms into a pig's tail-sprouting monster of cruelty, and when the escape comes, it is as dramatic as a child's fantasy. A giant man crashes through a door, gives Dudley a pig's tail for real, and informs Harry that he's not just special, he's a wizard. Every abused child dreams of rescue, but Harry's rescue is too perfect. Hagrid arrives on his birthday. He brings a cake. He tells Harry he is famous. "You're a wizard, Harry," he says. And in that moment, the entire world tilts. Suddenly, Harry is no longer the unwanted boy in the cupboard. He is legendary, adored, powerful, the boy who lived. Isn't that exactly what a boy in pain would dream, lying in a hospital bed, lost in the silence of his own mind? In this dream, good and evil are painted in vivid strokes. The Dursleys are wholly bad. Hogwarts is warm, filled with food and laughter and endless feasts. The wizarding world is rich in colour, tradition, and strange joy. There are talking hats, moving staircases, and ghosts who sing. Harry is no longer invisible. He is celebrated. Every child stares at his scar. Strangers whisper his name. He is chosen, not by accident, but by fate. As Dumbledore tells him, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. But what if the dream is all he has? Critics of the theory argue it's too cruel, too cynical. But its supporters point to details, oddities easily brushed off as fantasy, yet suspicious in their childlike logic. Why are adults in the wizarding world so often ridiculous or inept? Why does evil wear black cloaks and hiss like a snake, while good comes with red hair and jumpers from Molly Weasley? Why is there always a clear moral compass? Harry defeats evil not because he is the strongest, but because he is pure of heart. He is protected by love. He is saved by sacrifice. These are the building blocks of a child's fairy tale. The plot lines follow a dreamlike rhythm. Each year brings a new threat, a new test, and a final confrontation where Harry triumphs, barely but righteously. He wins not through skill, but through destiny. When he faces Voldemort in his first year, it is not Harry who destroys the Dark Lord. It is love, a mother's dying touch, still glowing on his skin. As Dumbledore explains, to have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever. That is not logic, that is longing. Even the way Hogwarts operates feels surreal, like the rules of a dream. Teachers vanish and reappear. Threats emerge from nowhere. Time itself bends in the form of time-turners. Paintings talk, candles float. Death is never final. People return as ghosts, echoes, memories. It's as if Harry's mind refuses to let anything go, even death. He conjures Sirius Black, a perfect godfather, Lupin, a gentle protector, Dumbledore, a grandfatherly genius, and when they die, they return, through mirrors, in dreams, as shimmering visions on the edge of the afterlife. And what of the final book? Harry, at the brink of death, meets Dumbledore in a place that looks like King's Cross. Is this real? Or has this been happening inside my head? Harry asks. Dumbledore replies, "Of course it is happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean that it is not real?" For those who believe the coma theory, this is the moment the veil is lifted. King's Cross is not a train station, it is limbo. Harry must choose return to life or move on. He chooses to return, but to what? Could it be that this is the mind's final flicker, a chance to imagine victory, closure, peace? Harry defeats Voldemort, peace returns. The boy has become a man. In the epilogue, 19 years later, everything is perfect. Everyone is married, children are happy, the world is safe, as if the mind in its final breath ties every thread with a bow. Could a real world be so neat, so satisfying? Supporters of the theory also point to how often pain is overwritten by meaning. Harry suffers, but never in vain. His parents' deaths give him magical protection. His suffering at the Dursleys gives him humility. Every scar has a purpose. Every loss brings growth. In real life, pain is often random, senseless. In dreams, it has purpose. It shapes the hero. It gives the trauma narrative meaning, and thus makes it bearable. Let us not forget the symbolism. The cupboard under the stairs, a coffin. The Hogwarts letters, white birds of freedom. The scar, not just a wound, but a brand of prophecy. The staircases that move on their own. The idea of discovering who you really are. These are not just fantasy tropes. They are the architecture of a mind trying to survive trauma. A boy redefining himself as more than a victim. But then comes J.K. Rowling's voice, clear and unwavering. When asked about the theory, she responded, "Harry really lived in the magical world. It's not an allegory, it's not a dream, it's not a coma, it's a real story, as real as magic can be." Her words are both a denial and a reassurance. She gives us permission to believe. She refuses to let Harry be reduced to tragedy. To her and to millions of readers, the magic was real. Still, the theory persists because deep down, perhaps we all fear waking up. We all know the comfort of stories, especially when life is cruel. We understand why a child might build a world where he matters, where there is order, love, and justice, where every hurt can be healed and every battle ends with hope. The idea that Harry never left the cupboard is unbearable, and yet hauntingly plausible. One fan wrote, "Maybe the real magic is that we all escaped with him." Perhaps that's why the theory stings. It suggests that the world we love, the feasts, the spells, the adventures, isn't just fiction, it's a symptom. A dream we share because we too are running from something, from loneliness, pain, loss. We cling to Harry's journey because it promises that the weak can be strong, the forgotten can be chosen, and love can defeat death. And in that sense, even if Harry was dreaming, even if he never opened his eyes again, the world he made matters. Because we saw it, we lived in it, we believed. And if belief can create something so vast, so detailed, so emotionally rich, then perhaps that is a kind of magic. One not measured in spells, but in stories. In the way a single boy's journey transformed a generation. Isn't that what Dumbledore meant when he said, "Words are, in my not-so-humble opinion, our most inexhaustible source of magic"? Perhaps Harry's world doesn't need to be real. Perhaps it only needs to mean something, and it does. Whether built by quills or coma dreams, the world of Hogwarts is a sanctuary, not just for Harry, but for all of us. A place to grow brave, a place to find friends, a place where, just maybe, we are more than what life made us. So, was it all a dream? A coma-fueled fantasy of a broken boy? Or was it something more? A story so powerful that it transcended the boundaries of fiction and reality? In the end, maybe it doesn't matter. Harry Potter lives, in books, in films, in hearts. Whether by wand light or imagination, he lives. And somewhere, far beyond King's Cross, a train is always waiting. Number 20. Sirius Black is still alive. Of all the deaths that shook the wizarding world, none left as raw a scar as the fall of Sirius Black. The moment he disappeared behind the veil in the Department of Mysteries, during the climax of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, felt wrong to many readers, too abrupt, too mysterious, too incomplete. A man as fiercely alive as Sirius, with his maddening smile, his reckless heart, and his unbreakable devotion to Harry, couldn't possibly just vanish like that into a curtain. Could he? The veil was never explained in detail. It fluttered in an unseen wind, whispered in forgotten tongues, and separated the living from the dead in a way that defied common magical understanding. Only those who had been touched by death, Harry, Luna, Neville, could hear its murmurs. That alone set it apart from any known magical artifact in the series. And when Bellatrix Lestrange hit Sirius with a stunning spell, he didn't collapse, he didn't bleed, he simply fell through the veil, like slipping between worlds. Fans have long asked, what was that place? Some believe the veil isn't death itself, but a portal, a doorway into another dimension, another existence, a place between life and death, what the Department of Mysteries might have called the limbo plane in their hushed research. And if Sirius fell into limbo rather than dying, what became of him? What if, like a ghost who chose not to return, he instead lingered, not as a shade, but as something else entirely? The theory took hold more fiercely after Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry uses the Resurrection Stone in the Forbidden Forest. The spirits of his parents, Remus Lupin and Sirius Black, appear beside him, walking with him toward his supposed death. They are not ghosts, Rowling made that clear. They are shadows conjured by the Deathly Hallows, tied by love. But something about Sirius in that moment felt different. His grin was wide, his tone mischievous. He seemed real. "I am sorry," Sirius said quietly. "I never meant for any of you to die for me." And Harry replies, "You'll stay with me?" To which Sirius answers, "Until the very end." It was the way he said it, not like a spectre offering comfort, but like a friend who had never really left. That single moment ignited a wildfire of speculation. Perhaps Sirius hadn't perished. Perhaps the Resurrection Stone didn't summon him from beyond, but merely revealed him, watching, waiting, always nearby. The Department of Mysteries had always been an enigma, rooms filled with orbs of prophecy, ever-turning time devices and locked doors even Dumbledore respected. The veil resided in the Death Chamber, a name that sounded final, yet offered no explanation. Hermione herself questioned its nature after Sirius vanished. "What's behind that curtain?" she had whispered. But no one had answers. Even Professor Lupin, who had spent his youth with Sirius, refused to speak about it. He simply looked haunted. In the years following Sirius's death, many fans proposed he was caught between worlds, that his soul, defiant and stubborn, refused to pass fully into death. He was an animagus, after all, a master of transformation. Who's to say that kind of magical prowess wouldn't leave traces? The Marauders had learned to bend the laws of magic as teenagers. Sirius, James, Remus, and Peter had explored the very boundaries of what was considered possible. Could that rebellious mastery have helped him linger? One fan theory that gained traction claimed that Sirius, in his animagus form of Padfoot, managed to escape the veil's grasp for moments at a time. Some believed he even appeared in the Deathly Hallows disguised among the black dogs roaming the outskirts of battle. Others believed he was the source of the Patronus that protected Harry and Dudley from the Dementors in Order of the Phoenix. Not Harry himself, but Sirius, finding a way to protect his godson from the shadows. Harry's connection to Sirius never truly faded. In Half-Blood Prince, he often thought of his godfather. "He would have laughed at that," Harry whispered once, staring at the Marauders' map. There was a sense that Sirius's presence remained, not just in memory, but in spirit. And when Harry entered Grimmauld Place, Sirius's old home, the air crackled with history. And something else. Something unseen. The most haunting detail came in The Cursed Child, when a new generation delved into time-turners and timelines, shifted like rivers. Though not canon to all fans, the notion that time could be bent, that echoes of the past might leak into the present, offered new hope. Perhaps Sirius, caught in some magical eddy between time and reality, found ways to influence Harry's journey, subtly, silently. Rowling, of course, has tried to close the door on this theory. In an interview, she was asked directly, "Is there any chance Sirius survived?" Her reply was firm, even mournful. "Sirius is dead, I'm sorry. His death was final. Harry lost him forever." She added that the Resurrection Stone brings back only a shadow, not life. But as any reader knows, Rowling often speaks in riddles. She once told readers that Dumbledore was dead and would never return, and yet we heard from him again in King's Cross. In that strange, otherworldly white train station in Harry's mind, Dumbledore said "Dun," Of course it's all happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean it's not real? Could the same not be said for Sirius? Just because Harry saw him with the stone, or in his dreams, or in his moments of deepest despair, doesn't make those visions imaginary. In the magical world, belief shapes reality more than we realize. Fans point out that Bellatrix's spell wasn't an Avada Kedavra. It was a stunner, a red light. Death by spell doesn't require falling into a veil. And yet Sirius did. The spell didn't kill him. The veil did, or transported him. Bellatrix herself seemed surprised by what happened. She laughed in victory, yes, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of confusion. She hadn't meant for him to disappear. And what of Kreacher? The loyal house elf once tied to Sirius, who later served Harry. He never truly accepted Sirius's death. When asked about it, he only muttered, "Master fell through the veil. Not was killed, not died." Kreacher, a creature steeped in ancient magic, seemed to know more than he said. His tone was not one of grief, but of mystery. As if the story wasn't finished, perhaps the most compelling piece of the theory lies in Harry's unwavering belief that Sirius is with him. Not just in memories, but in decisions, in dreams, in instincts. In the Deathly Hallows, when Harry considers sacrificing himself, it is Sirius's voice he hears most clearly. Not James, not Dumbledore. Sirius. "We are part of you," he tells Harry, "invisible to anyone else." That line alone became a rallying cry for those who believe Sirius never truly left. Tonks once told Harry, "Sirius was the best man I ever knew." Remus had said he would have died for you. But what if he didn't have to die? What if he chose a fate worse, to remain in a state of magical limbo, unable to communicate, unable to protect, forced only to watch? Imagine Sirius trapped behind the veil, watching Harry battle through the Triwizard Tournament, scream in pain from Voldemort's torture, bury Dobby, lose Dumbledore, fight in the Battle of Hogwarts. Imagine his fists pounding against an invisible wall, unable to reach the boy he loved like a son. That is the image some fans cannot shake, not a dead man, but a prisoner of fate. The Department of Mysteries remains closed to the public, its secrets locked in bureaucratic obscurity. But if one day Harry were to return, older, wiser, curious, perhaps he'd find a way to speak with those lost in the veil. Perhaps with the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and his unique legacy, Harry could pierce that boundary. And perhaps Sirius, waiting all these years, would finally step through. Until then, the fans hold on to hope. Because Sirius Black, the man who escaped Azkaban, who ran with werewolves, who laughed in the face of Voldemort, would never surrender to something as simple as death. Not without a fight, not without one last trick up his sleeve. And if anyone could defy the final curtain, it would be Padfoot, the godfather who stayed. Number 21, Slytherins are descendants of vampires. It began, as so many strange ideas do, with a whisper in the common room. A seventh-year boy, tall and pale with sunken cheeks and sharp features, once sat under the flickering torchlight of the Slytherin dungeons and muttered, "We aren't like the others, are we?" His voice, half in jest and half in a secret language of shadows, rippled through the dim halls like a spell unfinished. That was decades ago, but the idea that the students of Slytherin were not merely cunning or ambitious but other has never quite vanished. The theory, almost ludicrous at first glance, gained traction in fan circles long before the final books arrived. The pieces, they claimed, were too neat. Slytherin House alone lived beneath the castle, shrouded in darkness and surrounded by a chilling moat. The students studied potions with unnatural precision, spoke in soft, deliberate tones, and carried themselves with aristocratic detachment. Most chillingly, Their founder, Salazar Slytherin, was known to be obsessed with purity, bloodlines, and ancient secrets. Tom Riddle, Slytherin's most infamous heir, fanned the flames of this suspicion. At 16, Riddle's beauty was uncanny. He was a handsome boy, Dumbledore recalled, with jet-black hair and dark eyes. But there was something more. As Harry later described in The Half-Blood Prince, there was a sense of coldness about him, something watchful and calculating. His charm, his quiet voice, his ability to persuade even the most guarded individuals, all of it reminded readers of a creature long feared in folklore, the vampire. It didn't help that Severus Snape, the house's headmaster for most of Harry's time at Hogwarts, embodied every visual trope associated with the undead. With his bat-like robes, his bat-like entrance, and a gaze that seemed to drain warmth from the room, he was, to fans, the perfect candidate. His love for darkness, his mastery of poisons, and his secretive nature gave him a spectral aura. "Snape was a shadow," said Ron once, "and a greasy one at that." When fans began connecting the dots, they found more than they expected. Slytherins, they noticed, were rarely described as laughing. They excelled in subjects that dealt with the body and soul, potions, occlumency, legilimency, and rarely showed interest in herbology or care of magical creatures. They preferred the night, often sneaking through corridors after curfew. They spoke to snakes, the most vampiric of magical animals, with an eerie fluency. Even Draco Malfoy's pale skin and nocturnal presence in The Half-Blood Prince, where he disappeared mysteriously thin and drawn, added fuel to the theory. There is, too, the name. Slytherin! A hiss, a slither, a suggestion of movement just beyond sight. It echoed not only serpents, but whispered legends of Eastern European vampires who could slip through cracks and shadows like smoke. In Bulgarian folklore, the Varkalak hunted not only in forests but in the cellars of castles, just like the Slytherin common room nestled beneath the Black Lake. In the early 2000s, before the release of the 6th book, the internet buzzed with speculations. Some forums dedicated entire threads to the theory that Salazar Slytherin himself may have been a vampire, or worse, a Dhampir, a half-vampire who passed down traits without the curse. It would explain his obsession with lineage, his feud with Gryffindor, and his mysterious disappearance from Hogwarts. According to one fan theory, Slytherin did not flee the school, he retreated into the shadows, watching, waiting. There was something intoxicating about the idea. Vampires, after all, are the aristocracy of horror, seductive, cruel, ancient, and secretive. Slytherins, especially as portrayed in the early books, carried those same traits. They were the dark mirror of the hero. Harry feared the hat might place him there. "Not Slytherin, not Slytherin," he pleaded in Philosopher's Stone. Why did the very name feel like a threat? The fan theory peaked with the character of Tom Riddle. In Chamber of Secrets, his diary becomes a living extension of his soul, feeding off Ginny Weasley's life like a parasite. Riddle's words echo with hunger. "She poured out her soul to me, and her soul happened to be exactly what I wanted." A metaphor? Perhaps. But it reads like vampirism. Riddle, like Dracula, entered Ginny's heart through seduction and shadows. Even the Slytherin common room was suspect. When Harry and Ron, disguised as Crabbe and Goyle, entered in Chamber of Secrets, they described it as a long, low underground room with rough stone walls and ceiling, greenish lamps hanging from the ceiling. It felt, they said, like a place untouched by time, a crypt perhaps. J.K. Rowling, to her credit, addressed the theory directly. "There is no connection between Slytherins and vampires," she stated flatly. "Vampires do exist in the wizarding world, but they stand apart. They are not part of Hogwarts' structure." It was the kind of answer that silenced facts but not imagination. Rowling's refusal to elaborate only deepened the mystery. Fans noted that just because vampires weren't officially in Hogwarts, it didn't mean their descendants weren't. Rowling herself once admitted that Gilderoy Lockhart had staged a book signing with a vampire named Amarillo Lestat, an obvious homage to Lestat from Interview with the Vampire. And in Goblet of Fire, a vampire named Sanguini attended a slug club party described as a gaunt man with dark eyes and prominent fangs. Sanguini's silent presence in that scene, hovering near a student and looking hungry, made readers shiver. And where did this vampire appear? At a party hosted by a Slytherin, Professor Slughorn. Horace Slughorn, though affable, bore his own shadows. Obsessed with talent, bloodlines, and exclusivity, Slughorn invited only the best to his inner circle. The Slug Club, for all its glamour, felt like a modern coven. It was invitation only, it relied on secrecy, and it served only the elite. There is also the matter of blood. Slytherins value blood status above all. Vampires, too, are defined by blood, who they take it from, who they pass it to, who survives the exchange. The word pure blood in Slytherin isn't just a social distinction, it's practically a ritual. Could it be, fans wondered, that this obsession was not ideological, but biological? In The Half-Blood Prince, Draco is seen performing tasks in darkness, vanishing through vanishing cabinets, becoming thinner and more haggard. Harry even suspects he's been bitten by a vampire. Maybe he's been attacked, Hermione suggests. Maybe he's turned into something. Rowling plays with these shadows deliberately, crafting a subplot that feels soaked in Gothic dread. Of course, the vampire Slytherin theory isn't just about appearances, it's about what lies beneath. Vampires, like Slytherins, are creatures of contradiction. They crave connection but destroy those they love. They live forever but cannot truly live. They are, at their heart, lonely. Slytherins, too, are often portrayed as isolated. Harry himself notes that the house is misunderstood. There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin, Ron says once. That's not true, Hermione snaps. But the damage is done. Snape, the most complex Slytherin, embodies this contradiction. He is loyal but cruel, noble but shrouded in bitterness. Look at me, he whispers with his dying breath. In that moment he seems more human than ever, more alive, and yet he fades like a ghost. His love, his loss, his entire life spent in shadows. It feels less like a human tragedy than a curse handed down through centuries. Even basilisks, the great monsters of Slytherin, have vampiric qualities. They live in the dark, kill with a glance, and inspire dread across generations. The Chamber of Secrets is less a lair than a tomb. And who unleashed the basilisk? Tom Riddle, the boy who looked like a vampire, spoke like a vampire, and killed like one, too. The fan art followed. Soon, Tumblr and DeviantArt were flooded with portraits of vampire Slytherins, cloaked in velvet and shadow. Tom Riddle was depicted with fangs. Snape's reflection didn't appear in mirrors. Even Bellatrix Lestrange, though a black, not a Slytherin, was imagined with crimson lips and crimson hunger. The aesthetic was irresistible. The real question, fans argued, wasn't whether Slytherins were vampires. It was whether Slytherins were like vampires, and the answer was undeniable. They were proud, secretive, ancient, seductive, and feared. They valued legacy, feared death, and lived in the margins of society. Slytherins, like vampires, belonged to another world, one that watched from the shadows. Perhaps in the end the theory isn't literal, perhaps it's metaphor. Slytherins are vampires not by blood but by spirit. They haunt the pages of Harry Potter, not just as villains, but as cautionary figures, as lovers of the night, as guardians of secrets, as the children of a founder who vanished into myth. Number 22. Horcruxes can be made without murder. Could there have been another way? This question haunted a small corner of the wizarding world, not in the dusty halls of the Department of Mysteries or the secretive chambers of the Wizengamot, but in late-night dormitory whispers at Hogwarts, in curious fireside debates at the Leaky Cauldron, and in the quiet thoughts of magical philosophers who dared to question the immutable laws of dark magic. Could a Horcrux, this vile vessel of fragmented soul, have been created without murder? Some believed so, or at least they hoped. Not everyone could accept the notion that the only path to cheating death was soaked in blood. The first to bring up such a theory, at least in a recorded conversation, was an odd fellow named Thaddeus Thorn, an unspeakable dismissed for ethical overreach. He had spent years in the Hall of Prophecy, but his mind was consumed by soul magic. In his final published paper, Intent Over Act, The Moral Paradox of Soul Division, Thorn proposed a heretical idea. If the soul is a construct of spiritual integrity, not merely biological life, then surely its manipulation depends on the intent behind the action, not the action itself. Could grief, betrayal, or sacrifice divide the soul? Must it be murder? He never answered those questions, but he sparked a wave of speculation. Years later, a bright-eyed Ravenclaw named Iola Greaves carried Thorn's torch at Hogwarts. She was 16 when she submitted an essay titled Horcruxes Without Homicide to Professor Flitwick, who gave it high marks, but privately cautioned her never to discuss it outside the classroom. "Magic that feeds on the soul," he warned, "will feed on yours regardless of how you serve it." Still, Iola pressed on. Her arguments were delicate, bordering on dangerous. If a wizard's soul could be healed, as Albus Dumbledore insisted it could, without death, then could it not also be separated without it? She cited Dumbledore's words to Harry in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. It is the difference between being dragged into the arena to face a battle and walking in with your head held high. To Iola, this sounded like consent mattered. That choice mattered. But Rowling, omniscient in her own universe, closed the door on such hope. "Murder is essential," she wrote during an online fan chat. "It is the supreme act of violation. The soul must be torn by the most unnatural crime there is. There is no alternative." It was a definitive statement. And yet the debate didn't die. In fact, it grew. Consider Regulus Black, a boy born into darkness, raised among shadows, who eventually turned against the very lord he once served. When Regulus stole Voldemort's Horcrux from the cave, a locket once worn by Salazar Slytherin himself, he wasn't just committing theft. He was rejecting the logic of cruelty that governed Horcruxes. Regulus believed redemption was possible. "I have stolen the real Horcrux and intend to destroy it as soon as I can," he wrote in his note to Voldemort. "I face death in the hope that when you meet your match, you will be mortal once more." But what if Regulus had succeeded in destroying the locket and restoring the soul inside? What if he had tried not just to end Voldemort's immortality, but to repair what was broken? This brings us to another curious point, the repair of the soul. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry asks if the soul can be put back together, Dumbledore responds with rare clarity. "Yes," he says, "but it would be excruciatingly painful. It is not a spell, not a potion, but an act of remorse so profound that it causes agony, the soul knitting itself back together in grief." And here lies the paradox. If remorse can heal the soul, why can't grief or love divide it? If a mother's sacrifice, like Lily Potter's, can bind a magical protection so strong that it wards off death, why can't an act of selflessness fragment a soul not as a desecration, but as a gift? These are dangerous ideas, but magic like philosophy, is not afraid of danger. Take the case of Severus Snape. He never created a Horcrux, at least not in the conventional sense, but he lived like a man divided, half in the light, half in the dark, his very being fractured by guilt and purpose. His life was a Horcrux without the murder, some claimed. Not a container of immortality, but a vessel of secrets. His loyalty to Lily Potter tore his heart apart more deeply than any curse. Was his soul whole? It's hard to say. But he died with his eyes on Harry's, and with that death came peace. "Look at me," he said, and in those words lived all the agony of a soul that had already paid its price. And what of Hermione Granger, who once held a copy of Secrets of the Darkest Art in her bag? She never said what she read in those pages, but one passage stuck with her. "The soul is not a bone to be broken, it is a fire, and fire, once divided, becomes no less bright." This was written, curiously, in a margin note, not by the author, but by a previous reader. The ink was faded, the handwriting elegant. Some believe the note was penned by Bathilda Bagshot before she succumbed to age and enchantment. Bathilda, who had seen Grindelwald in his youth, who had watched the rise of darkness with the same eyes that once saw its birth. She may have believed in a gentler form of magic, but Voldemort did not. For him, murder was not a price, it was a pleasure. His soul, ripped again and again, grew no weaker, only more twisted. 7 times he chose to destroy, and 7 times he succeeded. And yet he was not immortal. "Nothing more than a shadow and a whisper," Dumbledore said. "A shell, a mockery of life." This is why the idea of a Horcrux without murder is so radical. It changes the story. It allows for light within darkness. It suggests that magic is not inherently evil, only the purpose it serves. Imagine, for a moment, a different boy, not Tom Riddle, but another student, perhaps in Durmstrang or Castellobruxo, who loses a sibling to dragonfire. His grief is unbearable. In desperation, he seeks to preserve that final moment, that last heartbeat. He performs a spell, complex, ancient, forbidden, and he splits his soul, not to hide it in a locket, but to share it, to keep a part of himself with the one he lost. Is this a Horcrux? Technically, yes. Morally, no. The act was not to avoid death, but to embrace memory, not to conquer, but to remember. We see echoes of this magic in the Resurrection Stone. Though not a Horcrux, it called forth shades of the dead, not living, not fully gone. They were neither truly alive nor truly dead, Rowling writes. But their presence was a balm. Could it be that this, too, was a form of soul magic, one not rooted in murder, but in longing? The Department of Mysteries kept such debates off the record. The Hall of Love, the Veil, the Time Room, these chambers knew more of the soul than any textbook. And yet, no official spell was ever devised to divide a soul without spilling blood. Perhaps it was too dangerous to explore, or perhaps someone already had, and paid the price. Gellert Grindelwald may have tried. Before Nurmengard, before the Hallows, Grindelwald studied the boundaries of life and death. Dumbledore once confessed he was brilliant. He could persuade even himself. If anyone could have attempted to divide the soul through intent, it would be him. But he turned, as all dark wizards do, toward conquest, and in the end he feared death as much as any man. It was Harry who changed the story. Harry who never created a Horcrux, but became one. Not by murder, but by accident. A part of Voldemort lives inside him, Dumbledore said. It happened when Voldemort's curse rebounded. Harry was a living Horcrux, yet he had never committed a single dark act. His soul was whole in purpose, if not in form. This might be the ultimate counterpoint to Rowling's statement, that a soul can be split without murder, but not by choice, not ethically, not sustainably, It was an accident, a scar, a tragedy, and yet it happened. It makes one wonder what magic truly is. Is it a force governed by rigid rules, or by the hearts of those who wield it? If intention matters, if remorse matters, then surely there is a spectrum of morality even in the darkest arts. The spell to kill is Avada Kedavra, and its power lies in its merciless intent. But what if there were a spell to part the soul gently, to create a Horcrux without hate? Would that still be evil? No such spell exists, and perhaps that's for the best, because in the end, the creation of a Horcrux is not about the act, it's about the choice. And Rowling made her choice clear. It is the supreme act of violation. Still the theory lingers, like smoke after fire, like whispers behind the veil. Could there have been another way? Perhaps not, but in the heart of a grieving wizard, in the silence of a forbidden library, in the echo of a name whispered through generations, hope remains. And magic listens. Number 23, Petunia is a suppressed witch. Petunia Dursley's kitchen was always spotless, the kind of spotless that spoke more of obsession than hygiene, a constant need for control in a life that had once slipped beyond her grasp. And perhaps no place better captured the essence of her internal exile than that painfully clean kitchen. A place grounded in normalcy, where no floating teacups or fluttering owls would ever interrupt her peace. But even in that polished silence, the shadows of another world lingered. For Petunia Evans, once just a girl in a suburban home, had once dreamed, fiercely, of magic. When Lily received her Hogwarts letter, it had been like a bomb dropped on their childhood. They had grown up together, close at first. Petunia was the older one, slightly bossy, always the one to take Lily by the hand. But everything changed when a boy named Severus Snape told Lily she was a witch. "Does she really think she's better than me?" Petunia would mutter in her room afterward, her words shaking with the kind of bitterness that only comes from wounded love. It was love, not rivalry, that began it all. Petunia had loved her sister and had loved the idea of being special too. And when Lily was chosen and she wasn't, something inside Petunia broke in two. Years later, in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Petunia spits venom about her sister. My sister being what she was. She got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school and came home every holiday with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. It's theatrical and nasty, yes, but in hindsight, also too specific. How would a self-declared hater of magic know what a Hogwarts letter looked like, or the detail about transfigured teacups? Her tone was furious, but laced with memory. These weren't things she heard in passing, these were things she remembered. One of the most telling moments comes in Order of the Phoenix, when Petunia receives a howler. The voice within it booms through the house. "Remember my last Petunia." For a moment she freezes. Her face drains of colour. Vernon yells, demanding answers, but she's silent. Then, in a low and haunted voice, she says, "The boy stays." Petunia Evans, who had spent years pretending to hate her nephew, loathe magic, and act as if the wizarding world didn't exist, suddenly seemed involved. She knew something, knew more than she was letting on. It was this moment that became the heart of the theory. What if Petunia had once belonged to the magical world too? Fans latched onto this idea quickly. They pored over interviews, letters, hidden lines in the text. Petunia's letter to Dumbledore was unearthed, the one she wrote as a young girl, begging him to let her attend Hogwarts. J.K. Rowling even mentioned in her early drafts that Dumbledore had responded to her kindly, explaining she could not attend the school because she was, regrettably, not magical. But Petunia had written the letter not out of politeness or whimsy. She had written it out of sheer desperation. That's what fueled the theory that someone so desperate must have had a flicker of magic, something left unexplored. There's even a scene in Deathly Hallows that suggests another layer. Petunia, standing before Harry, opens her mouth as if to say something, perhaps something meaningful, possibly even an apology. But she closes it again, and the words are lost. The moment is painfully quiet, but resonant. It was, to many readers, the unspoken confession of a woman who had lived her entire life in the shadow of a world she once longed to join. In the fandom, it became known as the theory of the latent witch. That Petunia Evans had been a squib in reverse, born to Muggle parents, showing rare magical tendencies, but suppressed by bitterness, jealousy, and the weight of rejection. Magic, as Rowling herself suggested in various writings, can sometimes go dormant if a person represses it hard enough. And Petunia, who spent years hating everything magical, could that hatred have been a shield against her own unfulfilled longing? It wasn't just her knowledge of magic that seemed suspicious, it was the intensity of her hatred. When Harry first arrives at number 4, Privet Drive, Petunia seems almost terrified. She scrubs everything about him away, the name of his parents, their world, their sacrifices. He sleeps in a cupboard, he's forbidden to ask questions, he's fed lies. Why such cruelty? Could it be that every time she looked at Harry, she was reminded of everything she never got to be? Not just a sister left behind, but a girl who had tried to climb the gate to a magical kingdom and found it locked, permanently, just beyond reach. There's another powerful moment in Philosopher's Stone when Petunia reacts to Hagrid's presence. Hagrid, having burst through the door like a hurricane of rain, sighs, and mystery, announces that Harry is a wizard. Petunia explodes. "You knew! Of course you knew! My sister got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school and came home every holiday with her pockets full of frog spawn." Her voice trembles. Her anger isn't just fury. It's betrayal, hurt, loss. She had wanted that letter too. She hadn't just seen it happen to Lily. She had expected it to happen to her as well. In 2014, J.K. Rowling finally responded. After years of speculation, she stated in an interview, Petunia was never magical. She was a Muggle, and she knew it. She hated magic because she wanted to be part of it, but she wasn't. The words came like a final spell. The theory, as compelling as it was, collapsed. There had been no suppressed magic, no spark waiting to be reignited. Petunia was, in Rowling's own words, 100% Muggle. Yet the heartbreak remained, because in many ways the truth was even more painful. It wasn't that Petunia was a rejected witch. It was that she had never been one, and yet had dreamed, pleaded, and wept to be part of a world that would never take her. How many nights had she listened to her sister describe charms class? How many times had she imagined walking the halls of a castle where portraits talked and staircases moved? She had stood at the edge of magic and found herself fundamentally, painfully excluded. In this light, her cruelty to Harry becomes more than just villainy. It becomes a shield. To hate magic was easier than to admit she had been broken by it. To mistreat Harry was to punish a world that had chosen someone else. Again. Because Harry, like Lily, had been chosen. He had the same eyes, the same laugh, and every time he performed accidental magic, it was like Petunia was being told once more that she had been left out. Her life with Vernon was a fortress of normalcy. There were no owls, no talking fireplaces, no cauldrons, just drills, roast beef, and a perfectly mowed lawn. Vernon was the kind of man who would never believe in magic, and Petunia chose him for that very reason. With him, She could bury the past, pretend it had never existed, and yet she named her son Dudley. A name so painfully plain it screamed, "I do not belong to your world." But it also hinted at how desperately she needed to build a life where she could feel powerful again. In the magical world, she had been nothing. In her own world, she could reign. And yet, beneath the layers of spite, something still flickered. Perhaps it was love, perhaps it was regret. In Order of the Phoenix, when Petunia hears the name Dementor, she shudders. She knows what they are. She remembers. Her voice, suddenly soft, says, "I heard that awful boy, telling her about them, years ago." The awful boy was Snape. And Petunia, the girl who wanted nothing to do with magic, had clearly been listening. Perhaps she had always listened. Perhaps, in her own way, she had been part of it all along, just not in the way she had hoped. The letter she once wrote to Dumbledore, begging him to let her in, remains one of the most human moments never printed in the main books. Rowling shared it with fans years later. Petunia's words had been childish and desperate. But Dumbledore, in his reply, had been kind. He had told her that magic could not be learned, that it was either born in a person or not. Petunia had burned the letter. She had never forgiven him. She had never forgiven magic. But imagine being her. Your younger sister disappears into a magical boarding school. She returns with new friends, strange robes, powerful spells. She finds love, builds a new life. And you remain, watching, listening, longing. You watch her die in a war you'll never understand, and you're left to raise her son. You can't love him, not properly, because he's magic and you are not. When Harry leaves Privet Drive for the last time, there's a scene Rowling wrote but didn't include in the final book. In it, Petunia looks at him and says, "You didn't just lose a mother in Godric's Hollow, you know. I lost a sister." It's a line that would have changed everything. It would have revealed the truth that Petunia had always carried, that her hatred was born from grief. Petunia was never a witch, but she was a tragedy. A woman who wanted to belong and never could. A woman who stood on the threshold of a world that glittered with wonder and was told no. Her bitterness, her cruelty, her icy silences, they were all the armor she wore to survive a truth she never wanted to face. Because perhaps the greatest pain in the Harry Potter universe isn't death or betrayal or war. It is being ordinary in a world that demands the extraordinary, and knowing with heartbreaking certainty that you will never, ever be chosen. Number 24, Hogwarts is a psychiatric clinic. It began with a whisper in fan forums, an unsettling notion that refused to fade. What if Hogwarts wasn't real? Not unreal in the sense of fiction, but unreal within its own universe. What if the castle was not a school for gifted young witches and wizards, but instead a psychiatric hospital? What if magic itself was the shared delusion of troubled minds, children battling the demons of their own consciousness? As disturbing as it sounds, this theory has grown roots, stretching across the digital soil of fandom discussions and alternative interpretations. And the more one looks, the more eerie clues begin to appear. The most frequently cited argument is Hogwarts' complete isolation from the outside world. The school is inaccessible by ordinary means. Hidden in the Scottish Highlands, it cannot be found on any map. Muggles cannot see it. To them, it appears as a crumbling ruin with a warning sign, "Danger, do not enter." Is it not the very definition of a facility built to remain unseen, untouched by society? In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hagrid tells Harry, "It's a secret, you see. You can't just walk in there, not unless you know how." What kind of school, fans ask, must hide so aggressively from the world? Then there's the entrance itself. The journey to Hogwarts always begins at platform 934, reachable only by running headfirst into a solid brick wall. A surreal image, a psychological wall if ever there was one. Could it represent the divide between the normal world and the recesses of the mind? Each child must take a leap of faith, disappearing from reality into a place only they can see. A dissociative transition, a crossing into a dream state. Once inside, the strange elements only multiply. The castle's architecture is ever-changing. Staircases move, rooms appear and disappear. The room of requirement morphs based on desire. These shifting realities echo the symptoms of a fractured perception, like a shared hallucination molded by individual need. As Luna Lovegood once calmly stated, "Things we lose have a way of coming back to us in the end, if not always in the way we expect." To a psychiatrist, this might resemble the coping mechanisms of those with severe trauma. Let's speak of the staff. Hogwarts is home to some of the most bizarre characters in the series. Professor Trelawney, who resides in the tower, rarely descends, drinks heavily, and constantly predicts death. Her speech patterns, like "the grim is coming for you," sound more like paranoid delusions than education. Argus Filch roams the halls, muttering curses under his breath, obsessively punishing students for minor offences. And then there's Gilderoy Lockhart, who suffers a complete identity breakdown and lands in St. Mungo's, quite literally in a locked ward for spell damage, believing himself to be someone he is not. But most haunting of all is Severus Snape. In fan reinterpretations of the Hogwarts as asylum theory, Snape is reimagined not as a potions master, but as a stern, conflicted psychiatrist. His obsession with discipline, his cold demeanour, his strict adherence to rules, these have more in common with a medical authority figure than a teacher. He addresses students by their surnames, shows little tolerance for emotional behaviour, and constantly uses shame as a method of control. Could this be therapeutic tough love, misunderstood through the lens of adolescent delusion? Albus Dumbledore in this version becomes the head doctor, the chief administrator of the facility. He is wise, eccentric, but always distant. He rarely intervenes directly unless there's a serious breakdown. He permits dangerous behaviour under the guise of freedom and choice, but always watches. "For in dreams," he once told Harry, "we enter a world that is entirely our own. Let them swim in the deepest ocean or glide over the highest cloud." A beautiful metaphor, but could it also be a diagnosis of those living entirely in their minds? Look at the concept of house divisions. Children are sorted into groups based on traits, not aptitude, bravery, intelligence, loyalty, ambition. Isn't that how certain psychiatric frameworks classify patients? Not by skills, but by emotional dispositions. Gryffindors impulsive and bold, mania. Ravenclaws obsessed with logic, hyper-intellectual detachment. Hufflepuffs kind but sometimes lost in the background, social withdrawal. Slytherins secretive and power-driven, narcissistic tendencies. And the sorting hat itself? It speaks, it probes thoughts, it places children according to inner drives. A symbolic diagnostic tool, perhaps? In one of the eeriest fan adaptations of this theory, a forum thread turned into a sprawling alternate universe fiction. In it, Hermione is diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, her need for control and structure becoming a mechanism to cope. Ron is viewed as deeply anxious, always second-guessing himself, overwhelmed by his large family. Draco Malfoy becomes a narcissistic personality trying to win approval. Neville suffers from post-traumatic stress due to childhood abuse. And Harry is the most tragic. A schizophrenic orphan suffering from hallucinations, he escapes into a magical world to flee his neglected upbringing. The Dursleys, in this retelling, are not cartoonish villains. but overwhelmed foster parents who do not understand the boy's condition. When he talks of flying motorbikes and letters that arrive by owl, they grow terrified. They try to lock him away, not out of cruelty, but fear. "There's no such thing as magic," Vernon Dursley insists, a chilling line if taken literally. It's easy to dismiss these ideas as bleak fan fiction, but what happens when we look at St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries? The one place in the wizarding world dedicated to mental health is never treated with much gravity. Lockhart is a forgotten patient. People like the Longbottoms are visited but pitied, their condition unchangeable. The hospital is hidden, its entrance disguised behind a broken-down department store, an apt metaphor for the invisibility of mental illness. Is it possible that the entire wizarding world is a construct created within its walls? Even the threat of Voldemort takes on a new meaning. He is never truly seen by muggles. He lives in whispers, in fears, in people's minds. He is trauma personified. Harry's connection to him, a psychic link that brings visions, pain, confusion, resembles dissociative identity symptoms. The ultimate battle between Harry and Voldemort could then symbolize the boy confronting his deepest fears and reclaiming his identity. One scene particularly unnerves those who subscribe to this theory. In the Order of the Phoenix, Harry is taken to the Department of Mysteries. There he sees the veil, a tattered curtain in the middle of a stone arch. Sirius falls through it and disappears, never to return. No explosion, no wound, no scream. Just gone. Fans argue that this represents the thin boundary between life and death, or perhaps between sanity and complete collapse. A metaphorical suicide, a final psychotic break. He's just beyond the veil, Luna whispers. She, more than anyone, exists in both worlds, the magical and the mournful. Still, there's one quote that keeps returning in this eerie reimagining. In Deathly Hallows, when Harry speaks with Dumbledore in what seems to be King's Cross Station, pure white, dreamlike, he asks, "Is this real? Or has this been happening inside my head?" And Dumbledore replies, "Of course it is happening inside your head, Harry. But why on earth should that mean that it is not real?" It's a beautiful line, and for many, proof that the metaphor of Hogwarts as a mental construct isn't merely plausible, it's poetic. J.K. Rowling, when asked directly about this theory, answered with firmness, "It's fiction. Hogwarts is a real place for wizards and witches. It's not a metaphor for a hospital." She resisted the dark romance of the idea. She wrote it as a place of hope and growth. Yet fiction has a strange power. Once released into the world, stories take on lives of their own. Readers find meaning where they need it most. It is possible, even necessary, to view Hogwarts as many things: a school, a sanctuary, a battlefield, and yes, perhaps even an asylum, a safe place for young minds in crisis. The theory doesn't diminish the magic. For some, it enhances it. In a world where mental illness remains stigmatized, to imagine that broken children could be heroes is not tragedy, it's triumph. Even if none of it is true, because after all, isn't that what magic really is? A belief in something better than what we see, a fire in the dark, a whisper that says, "You are not alone." Number 25. Filch became a squib due to a magical accident. Argus Filch always walked with a limp, and not only in the physical sense. There was something emotionally broken in the way he clutched his keys, in the way he growled at students for tracking mud into the castle or for giggling too loudly in the corridors. He wasn't just a grumpy old caretaker. He was a man who lived every day in the shadow of magic he could not perform. Hogwarts, a place where wonders unfolded at every corner, was to him both home and hell. And for years, a strange theory has quietly echoed in the corridors, not swept clean by Mrs. Norris's patrol. What if Argus Filch hadn't been born a squib? What if his condition was the result of something much darker, an experiment gone wrong? The origin of this theory is not easily traced, but it emerged with surprising strength in the years after Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, when fans first saw Filch's desperate attempt to learn magic through a quick spell correspondence course. The letter, intercepted by Harry, after being dropped in a flurry of Filch's embarrassment, read, "I can learn the very basics of magical spells in a few short weeks." It hinted at a painful truth. Filch had not given up. He still believed, even after all those years, that magic might be coaxed into his blood. But why would a man past middle age still hope for such a thing? Unless perhaps he once had it, and lost it. This is where the story takes a speculative turn. Some fans proposed that Filch had been the subject of a magical experiment when he was very young, perhaps carried out by his own family. One theory points to the obscure and largely forgotten work of Euphemia Filch, a minor witch from the late 19th century who was obsessed with magically enhancing lineage traits in her descendants. Her name appears only once in the background of a Pottermore article detailing squib histories. It is speculated that Euphemia, known for her obsession with purifying magic through controlled exposure to enchanted elements, may have tampered with Argus's magical development while he was still in the cradle. It's said that she worked with powdered grafthorn horn and the venom of rune spores, trying to stimulate magical surges in her family line. If Argus had been a test subject in such a risky experiment, the results could explain much. A child born with magic, but whose abilities were burned out or suppressed before they could bloom. Filch's lack of magical aptitude is unusual even among squibs. There are moments where he almost feels the castle. "I know when a student's out of bed," he once snarled at Ron and Harry in the Sorcerer's Stone. "I just do." That uncanny intuition, many argue, isn't just the paranoia of a bitter man. It's something deeper. Hogwarts is a sentient place, alive in its own mysterious way. That Filch is so in tune with it has always seemed strange. He knows its secrets, its shortcuts, its moods. Some students said he could smell mischief in the air. "He's got a sixth sense, that one," Fred Weasley joked once, though not without a hint of nervous respect. If Filch had once had magic within him, if the halls of Hogwarts still whispered to some buried part of that magic, it would explain his almost preternatural presence there. Even Mrs. Norris, his ever-present cat, added to the mystery. Their bond was unusually intense, as though they were one being. Some rumours, almost certainly unfounded, whispered that she was his familiar, or worse, an animagus bound to his service in penance. Of course, J.K. Rowling dispelled such theories publicly, writing on Pottermore, "Mrs. Norris is just a particularly clever cat. No enchantments, just loyalty." But still, the way she always appeared right before Filch did made people wonder. And yet the most compelling piece of the theory comes not from magical intuition or folklore, but from a line in the Half-Blood Prince. When Draco Malfoy narrowly escapes Filch's grasp after sneaking into the room of requirement, Filch mutters to himself, "Would have got him if I could still—" He trails off. "Still what, Filch?" asks a curious reader. Some fans believe this moment reveals a crack in his hardened facade, a memory of power once held and lost. Was he going to say, "If I could still use magic"? Was it a slip of the tongue, or just the mutterings of a tired man? It's important to mention that the official canon contradicts all this. Rowling was firm in her statements. Filch is a squib by birth. He was never magical. She said so clearly, answering a fan's question. She elaborated that he was born into a magical family but never showed signs of power himself. "It's a source of great bitterness for him," she added, and certainly his bitterness runs deep. He lashes out not only at students, but at the very magic they use so freely. His hatred of Peeves the poltergeist seems to go beyond simple frustration. "I'll have you out of here one day. See if I don't," he would yell, shaking a fist that could do nothing. Still, readers can't help but wonder, why would he stay at Hogwarts for decades if he hated magic so much? Unless a part of him never gave up hope. Unless he believed that being close to magic might one day rekindle something inside him. In Chamber of Secrets, after Mrs. Norris is petrified, his devastation is almost unbearable. "You'll be next, mudbloods," someone wrote on the wall. Filch, standing near the cat, looked as though he'd been struck. It was not just the loss of a pet. It was the terror of being powerless again, of being targeted, of being reminded that he could not fight back. Stories from older students, long graduated, whisper that when Filch was younger, he tried more than just correspondence courses. A Gryffindor girl from the 1970s once swore that she saw Filch performing wandless gestures late at night in the trophy room, muttering incantations from a crumpled parchment. She said she'd felt the air vibrate for a second. "He looked at me like I wasn't supposed to be alive," she told the Daily Prophet in an anonymous letter. "And then he ran." There are rumours, too, of a room in the dungeons that no student has entered, locked behind a thick wooden door with metal bolts. It is said that Filch keeps something there. Not contraband, but hope. A pile of failed potions, broken wands, magical artifacts that once promised power. "Don't go near that room," a young Neville Longbottom once said. "He'll hex your toes off." The irony, of course, is painful. Filch could never hex anything, but perhaps the fear he inspired came from a deeper place. In Order of the Phoenix, when Umbridge gives Filch unprecedented authority, he almost glows with purpose. "She's given me permission," he says, eyes gleaming. "Permission to whip the students." But it isn't cruelty alone. It's the taste of control, of finally having power in a place that has denied him all his life. Power, even borrowed, feels like justice to a man who has spent decades mopping up magical messes without the means to create any of his own. In quiet moments, some said Filch would stare at portraits with envy, especially the magical ones, moving and speaking, laughing at him in their frames. "I'm not deaf, you know," he once barked at the portrait of Sir Cadogan, "and I'm not blind either." There's a fury there, a resentment that seems to come from a place deeper than mere annoyance, as though he once stood on the edge of that world, almost ready to step into it, and then was pulled away. His full name, Argus Filch, offers a subtle clue. Argus, the all-seeing watchman of Greek myth, was a creature with 100 eyes who saw everything and slept with only half of them closed. It's almost too perfect. Filch sees everything but can touch nothing. He guards magic like a gatekeeper forbidden to enter. Perhaps this is coincidence, or perhaps the name was chosen with poetic irony, reflecting the tragedy of a man who spends his life watching over a world that rejected him. The tragedy deepens when one considers that Hogwarts, in all its grandeur and wisdom, offers no formal path for squibs, no classes, no programs, no real place. The castle embraces werewolves and half-giants more openly than it does those born without magic. In this, Filch becomes a symbol not just of bitterness, but of neglect. He is what happens when the magical world turns its back on its own kind, not for being dangerous, but for being disappointing. And so the theory lives on, not because it is confirmed, but because it feels true. It explains the sharpness in his voice, the ache in his eyes, the frantic way he clutches Mrs. Norris as if she's the only creature who sees his worth. Maybe he was born a squib, maybe not. But there's no doubt that Argus Filch is a man who lives every day as though he lost something and never quite stopped trying to get it back. Number 26, Albus Severus will become a dark wizard. Harry's hand trembled slightly as he helped his youngest son board the Hogwarts Express. The station shimmered with early September sunlight, and steam rose around their feet like a theatrical mist, as if the world itself hesitated at the edge of a prophecy. "Albus Severus," Harry said, voice soft but firm. "You were named for 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was the bravest man I ever knew." From that single line in the epilogue of Deathly Hallows, a storm of speculation began. Why such a heavy name? Why place upon the shoulders of an 11-year-old boy the legacy of both Albus Dumbledore and Severus Snape, 2 of the most morally complex and emotionally haunted figures in the entire wizarding saga? As if naming a child wasn't already hard enough, Harry Potter had seemingly forged an identity for his son rooted in contradiction, secrecy, and impossible expectations. And fans noticed. Theories erupted not just about the psychological toll of such a name, but about what it foretold. Albus Severus Potter, they whispered, might not be the gentle boy Harry hoped for. Perhaps, just perhaps, he would grow into something darker. Maybe, in the shadows of those 2 towering names, a new antagonist would emerge. Consider the facts. Albus Severus arrives at Hogwarts under a cloud of insecurity. "What if I'm put in Slytherin?" he asks his father with trembling fear. Harry replies, "Then Slytherin House will have gained a wonderful young wizard." But that reassurance doesn't erase the fear. Deep inside, Albus is torn between his father's legacy, the weight of a name that echoes with wars and betrayals, and a desperate need to be seen for who he truly is, not who he was named after. What unfolds in The Cursed Child only feeds the theory. The play opens with Albus's struggle to adjust to Hogwarts. Unlike his father, he does not thrive. He fails to connect with his classmates, underperforms in magic, and worst of all, is sorted into Slytherin. For him, it feels like exile. "I'm nothing like you," he tells Harry. "You're popular, you're good at stuff. I'm not." The bitterness is real, and it grows like a seed left in cold soil. This bitterness transforms into resentment, especially as his relationship with his father deteriorates. In one scene, after another heated argument, Harry shouts, "Sometimes I wish you weren't my son." Albus is stunned. The words echo with cruelty. Though Harry quickly regrets them, the damage is done. The boy withdraws further into himself, and the audience can feel it, the tug of something dark pulling at him, the very kind of void that once beckoned a boy named Tom Riddle. But Albus isn't alone in his pain. He finds solace in an unlikely friend. Scorpius Malfoy, son of Draco, a boy also haunted by his family's past. Together they become inseparable, 2 misfits trying to make sense of their identities, their legacies. It's Scorpius, not Albus, who's plagued by rumors of dark origins, whispers that he's actually Voldemort's son. Ironically, Scorpius remains kind, loyal, and intellectually brilliant. Albus, on the other hand, becomes more impulsive, more willing to risk everything to escape the shadow of his father. That desire leads him to a dangerous decision. When he learns about a hidden time turner, Albus convinces Scorpius to help him travel back in time and save Cedric Diggory. His plan is noble in theory, to right a wrong, to give meaning to a senseless death, but reckless in execution. He meddles with time itself, ignoring the lessons of history, and ends up altering the timeline catastrophically. In one twisted version of the past, Cedric is humiliated during the Triwizard Tournament, turns bitter, and eventually becomes a Death Eater. As a result, Voldemort wins the Battle of Hogwarts and Harry Potter is dead. In this reality, the wizarding world is ruled by darkness, and Albus, now erased from existence, is nothing but a ghost of what could have been. Scorpius, who alone remembers both timelines, is horrified. But Albus, when he returns, his guilt is immense. Yet even then he does not fully grasp the magnitude of what he almost unleashed. "I just wanted to do something good," he says. It's a chilling echo of Dumbledore himself, who once told Harry, "I was offered power, and I took it, for the greater good." In that moment, the connection between names becomes more than symbolic. It becomes prophetic. One cannot help but draw parallels between Albus Severus and the young Tom Riddle. Both boys struggled with identity, with feeling misunderstood and unwanted. Both had a complicated relationship with power and legacy. Both felt alienated from their peers. And both sought to change their circumstances, no matter the cost. "I don't belong here," Albus says at one point. "I don't belong anywhere." It's not hard to imagine how, under slightly different circumstances, this pain could curdle into something darker. Even J.K. Rowling herself has addressed the theory. "Albus is a complicated boy," she said in an interview. "Like many teenagers, he's trying to figure out who he is, but there's no evil in him. His journey is about being himself, not being Voldemort." But for many fans, this statement doesn't end the conversation. It merely deepens the intrigue. After all, how often in Rowling's world has evil begun with good intentions? Peter Pettigrew wanted to belong. Barty Crouch Jr. wanted to prove himself. Even Snape, in his youth, was seduced by power before love changed his course. It's also worth noting that magic itself seems to respond differently to Albus. His spells often misfire. He struggles in his classes. There's a tension between him and the very world he was born into, almost as if he exists slightly out of sync with it. Could this be foreshadowing? Could it suggest that the path before him is not the one of a traditional hero, but something more unpredictable, more unstable? One of the most compelling scenes in The Cursed Child is when Albus and Scorpius meet Delphi, a mysterious young woman who claims to be the niece of Amos Diggory. She encourages their time travel mission, manipulates their emotions, and gains their trust. But Delphi is no innocent ally. She is, in fact, the secret daughter of Lord Voldemort and Bellatrix Lestrange. Her mission is to rewrite history and resurrect the reign of her father. It is here that the theory reaches its most dangerous territory. Albus, for a time, is a pawn in Delphi's plan. His choices, however misguided, nearly help bring about the return of the Dark Lord. He is not evil, but he enables evil. And in doing so, he joins a long line of characters in the Harry Potter universe who, despite good intentions, bring harm through blindness, desperation, or pride. After the crisis is averted and Delphi is captured, one might think Albus has learned his lesson. He and Harry visit Cedric's grave, and there is a sense of closure. Yet the question lingers, will this experience harden him, or will it make him wiser? The play ends on a hopeful note, but it does not erase the scars of what came before. There is also a poetic irony in Albus's name. Albus, meaning white, pure. Severus, meaning stern, harsh. Together they form a dichotomy. Light and shadow, innocence and bitterness, compassion and cruelty. It is not just a name, it is a destiny forged in contrast. Perhaps Harry hoped that by giving his son these names he could teach him to balance both sides. But balance is fragile and childhood wounds can run deep. The prophecy of the original series, "Neither can live while the other survives," has always hung over the Potter family. What if, in some way, it never truly ended? What if a new prophecy waits in the wings unspoken? What if Albus Severus, in trying to escape the legacy of his father, forges one of his own, one that neither hero nor villain can control? A chilling detail often overlooked is that Delphi refers to herself as the augury, a bird believed to predict death through its song. And who, in this future, is most connected to that death? Albus. He is the one she deceives, the one she nearly uses to fulfill her plan. Was it fate that he bore the names of Dumbledore and Snape? Or was it Delphi's own manipulation that awakened something in him, something that might yet stir again? In the end, we do not know what becomes of Albus Severus Potter. The canon ends with his father's reassurance, his friendship with Scorpius, and the calming of the storm. But stories have a way of continuing long after the last page. In the corridors of fan fiction, in the chambers of theory, Albus walks still, a boy with a name too big for his shoulders, carrying the weight of both greatness and temptation. And perhaps that's what makes his story so haunting. Because in him we see a truth about the wizarding world and our own. That darkness does not always come roaring. Sometimes it comes in the form of a boy, quiet and sad, asking his father, "What if I'm not like you?" And sometimes the answer to that question is, what shapes the world forever? Number 27. House elves are descendants of an ancient magical race. Of all the curious theories that have emerged from the ever-growing community of Harry Potter readers, one stands out for its audacity and its strangely compelling logic. The idea that house elves are not mere magical creatures, but the long-fallen descendants of a powerful ancient race of wizards. According to this theory, the elves' current servitude is not the result of a natural place in the magical hierarchy, but the final chapter in a tragic saga of conquest, suppression, and forgotten glory. The first seed of this theory is planted not in a dusty tome or obscure fan forum, but in the books themselves, specifically in the remarkable magical feats house elves are able to perform. Dobby, the brave and self-sacrificing elf who once served the Malfoy family, repeatedly demonstrates an ability that even adult wizards at the height of their powers struggle with. He can apparate and disapparate within Hogwarts Castle. As Hermione Granger reminds us, you can't apparate or disapparate inside the Hogwarts grounds. Book 4, Goblet of Fire, a rule enforced by ancient spells protecting the school. And yet Dobby appears with a snap of his fingers, unrestricted by the wards that bind every witch and wizard. This single contradiction, an elf doing what no human wizard can, has fueled speculation that house elves may possess a different, and in some ways superior, form of magic. The theory claims that they didn't always serve, that once they ruled. In the darkest corners of the magical archives and in whispers among conspiracy theorists, there exists the tale of the Eldari, a race of ancient magic wielders who lived before the establishment of Hogwarts, perhaps even before the founding of the Ministry of Magic. The Eldari, according to legend, wielded magic not with wands, but through innate power and emotion, a method disturbingly similar to how house elves function today. Supporters of this theory often point to Kreacher, the ancient and bitter elf of the Black family, who, despite his venomous temper and advanced age, demonstrates incredible magical finesse. In Deathly Hallows, Kreacher single-handedly subdues Mundungus Fletcher and drags him back to Grimmauld Place, an act that would require strength, skill, and magical coordination far beyond what is expected of a mere servant. Notably, he performs this task without a wand and seemingly without effort. But perhaps the most intriguing clue lies in the way wizards treat the elves' past, with discomfort, evasion, and silence. Throughout the series, the topic of house elf origins is never addressed in detail. The esteemed Hogwarts Library is silent on the subject. Magical history texts mention their current roles, but there is a conspicuous void where their origin story should be. Hermione's efforts to liberate house elves through SPW are met not only with ridicule but with an eerie kind of dismissal, even from professors. Professor Binns, the ghostly history of magic teacher, refuses to entertain discussions that deviate from approved curriculum. When asked about elf history, he simply waves it off as nonsense, a curious reaction from a man, or spirit, known for monotone recitations of magical fact. Some theorists suggest this silence is not accidental, but deliberate. If the magical community were to accept that house elves once stood as equals, or even superiors, it would threaten centuries of magical hierarchy. It would cast a shadow on the legacy of wizard kind, which prides itself on control, progress, and a carefully curated history. In Order of the Phoenix, Sirius Black bitterly admits, "My parents, the Blacks, thought themselves pure and noble, but they kept a slave in chains and called it loyalty." What if that slave was once a ruler? The elves' manner of speech is often used as evidence against their intelligence, but some believe this too was imposed upon them. The broken grammar, the self-deprecating tone, "Dobby is sorry, Dobby didn't mean to, Dobby is a bad elf," might be the result of magical conditioning, akin to the unforgivable curses. In fact, the pain Dobby inflicts upon himself whenever he disobeys or speaks out hints at some enchantment deeper than simple fear. Perhaps a curse centuries old, designed to break their will, degrade their identity, and rewrite their nature. When Dobby first meets Harry in Chamber of Secrets, his fear is overwhelming. He punishes himself for merely warning Harry of danger. But beneath that fear lies something more profound. Hope. He dreams of freedom, of clothes, of choice. These are not the dreams of a creature born for servitude. These are the dreams of a fallen being who remembers, if only subconsciously, what it meant to be free. Rowling herself was asked about this theory in a 2007 interview and admitted, "It's an imaginative idea, but no, house elves were always meant to be their own magical species. Their magic is different, not necessarily stronger or weaker, just different." Still, for many fans, her denial does not erase the tantalizing trail of clues embedded in the story. After all, Rowling has a habit of revealing truths only after many years have passed, and the nature of magic in her world is far from fully understood. Even Dumbledore, that paragon of wisdom, appears to avoid speaking about elf magic with clarity. He praises Winky's loyalty, marvels at Dobby's independence, but never offers an explanation for how they do what they do. In Half-Blood Prince, he tells Harry, "Differences of habit and language are nothing at all if our aims are identical and our hearts are open." But he never includes elves in that open-hearted philosophy, at least not openly. Perhaps, as some fans believe, he knew the truth and simply chose silence. There's also the peculiar consistency of elf magic across generations. Unlike wizards, whose abilities must be trained and refined, elves seem to inherit complex magical knowledge as instinct. Even young elves like Hokey, who served Hepzibah Smith, perform household magic, transportation, and potion assistance with no formal instruction. This hereditary memory of magic feels ancient, primal, more like a relic of a magical race than the traits of a domesticated species. Another compelling angle is the reverence elves seem to have for traditions and rules. Creatures' obsessive loyalty to the Black family, even after being abused and neglected, seems more than habit. It borders on religious devotion. What if this loyalty is the remnant of an oath, a magical covenant imposed upon them generations ago, when the last of the Eldari were defeated and bound to servitude? Hogwarts itself may hold clues. The kitchens hidden beneath the Great Hall are operated entirely by house elves. But why would the founders of Hogwarts, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, entrust the very heart of the school to a race considered inferior. Unless, of course, there was once mutual respect. Some argue that Helga Hufflepuff, known for her kindness and inclusion, was the last to oppose the enslavement of the Eldari and chose to give them a sanctuary beneath the school. There are even whispers that Slytherin's famed Chamber of Secrets may not have been the only secret space within Hogwarts. What if another chamber exists, lost or sealed, dedicated to the memory of the Eldari, housing relics of their magic, their language, and their history? Could the castle itself, sentient in its own magical way, be protecting that knowledge? The theory takes a darker turn when discussing the curse of the Black family. It is said that their decline, madness, early deaths, betrayal, may be linked to their treatment of house elves. The murder of Sirius Black's brother Regulus occurred after he attempted to save a house elf creature from certain death. Perhaps by betraying their ancient bond with the Eldari, the Black family drew upon themselves a curse they could neither understand nor break. Some point to the elf magic's unique qualities, its lack of dependency on wands, its emotional core, its purity. Wands, after all, were created to channel and control magic, a human invention to tame a wild force. If elves once wielded raw magic, they may have seen wands as a degradation of the natural order. It's telling that no elf ever seeks one. Even their names carry weight. Dobby, Winky, Creature, Hokey. They sound like nicknames, not true names, perhaps given by their masters, replacing ancient names now lost. Could their true names be etched in some forgotten language, buried beneath layers of magical suppression? Then there is the bond of servitude itself. In Chamber of Secrets, Lucius Malfoy frees Dobby by accident, slipping him a sock. But why should a piece of clothing break a magical contract? Unless, of course, the original pact, the one that enslaved the Eldari, was tied to material symbols of dominance. Clothes, traditionally a mark of status, may have become both the chains and the key. The emotional capacity of house elves also betrays their deeper nature. Dobby loves Harry with a fierce loyalty that cannot be explained by conditioning alone. Creature, after years of hatred and betrayal, turns his heart to Harry after being shown simple kindness. These are not instincts of beasts. They are the reactions of sentient beings capable of love, hate, sacrifice, and memory. And perhaps the greatest clue lies in what the wizards fear: magic they do not understand, power they cannot control, and history that might reveal them not as heroes, but as conquerors. The tale of the Eldari may never be confirmed. It may be only a myth. But in the magic of the elves, in their tears, in their resilience, in the way they whisper old words and vanish through ancient walls, there lingers the echo of a time long past, a time when they were not called servants, but sovereigns. Number 28, Moaning. Myrtle is a ghost of prophecy. There was always something eerie about how often Moaning Myrtle turned up at just the right moment. Not quite a friend, not quite a foe, and certainly never helpful on purpose. Yet her presence always carried meaning. For a ghost who supposedly died forgotten and bullied, she seemed unusually tethered to the heartbeat of Hogwarts. First, with the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, then with Draco Malfoy's bathroom breakdown. Even the goblet she hovered near in the prefect's bathroom led Harry to a crucial clue in the Triwizard Tournament. Was this really the random mischief of a weeping spirit, or was Myrtle pulled by threads of fate herself? The first time Harry met Myrtle, she appeared more annoying than mysterious. Floating above a flooded bathroom, sobbing over cruel words, she seemed little more than a comedic nuisance. But by Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, she had become essential to the story's darkest mystery. It was Myrtle who provided the critical revelation. I remember seeing a pair of great big yellow eyes. She had whispered, wide-eyed, and shivering. "I died in this very cubicle. I just remember seeing the eyes." That single line lit the path toward the basilisk, making her the first true witness of its attack. No other ghost, no other professor, no book in the library had that clue. Yet no one seemed to notice her significance. Dumbledore didn't seek her out. McGonagall dismissed her. Peeves laughed at her misery. Even the other ghosts kept their distance. Nearly headless Nick never included her in gatherings, and the Fat Friar pitied her without taking her seriously. But perhaps that was exactly the point. The ignored girl in life, now the overlooked ghost in death, still, inexplicably, present whenever destiny whispered through Hogwarts' ancient stone halls. Consider her encounter with Draco Malfoy in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Of all the places Draco could have hidden to cry in secret, he chose the bathroom haunted by a ghost. And not just any ghost, Myrtle. She became his confidant, a tragic mirror of his own isolation. "He's sensitive. People don't understand him," Myrtle told Harry defensively. "He's not a bad boy." That quote alone raised eyebrows. Why did Malfoy, a Slytherin trained to hide his emotions, trust her? Why did he reveal his torment to a ghost who couldn't leave the bathroom? Unless something about Myrtle's presence pulled him toward her, as if the magic of the castle itself knew where to send the broken-hearted when the world grew too heavy. It wasn't just Malfoy. Cedric Diggory found answers there too. Harry's clue about the golden egg in Goblet of Fire came after Myrtle's cheeky suggestion. "Go on, open it under the water. That's what the others do." Others? How many champions had she helped? Was she simply lingering in the bathroom, or was she drawn by a force that guided her to these moments? She offered comfort, secrets and laughter, often laced with just enough sadness to keep her from feeling fully alive. Yet she was always precisely where she needed to be. Myrtle's death itself is laced with significance. She died at the hands, or eyes, of a basilisk, a creature summoned by Tom Riddle. She was, in many ways, his first victim. A student who died to further the legend of Slytherin's heir. That alone should mark her as an important figure. Her death shut down Hogwarts for a year. Her bathroom became the resting place of the basilisk for decades. And yet, the school rebuilt around her, never moving her remains, never cleansing the space. Why, the answer may lie in her being what some fans now call a ghost of prophecy. The idea suggests that Myrtle, while not a seer in life, became a vessel of fate in death, not a Trelawney babbling nonsense, but a tragic whisperer of truths who speaks only when destiny demands it. The theory isn't without merit. Hogwarts is filled with magic beyond comprehension, sentient staircases, moving paintings, rooms that appear only when needed. Couldn't a soul, bound in grief, become a vessel for something greater? J.K. Rowling, when asked about this theory, responded with careful words. Myrtle is a tragic, wounded soul. She's stuck in adolescence. She has no great mission. She serves as a reminder of what cruelty does. But even Rowling's denial didn't stop fans. After all, Dumbledore once said, "Truth is a beautiful and terrible thing, and should therefore be treated with great caution." Perhaps even Rowling, in her wisdom, knew that sometimes stories grow beyond their authors,